Hey everyone, what's up? How's it going? This is Finite MTG, and today I am bringing you a draft I did recently of Crackshot's Peasant Cube, Mad Peasant, and I'll have a link to that in the video description as well. So I'm a big fan of the lower rarities in general in Magic, and Peasant Cubes are no exception. I've drafted this one before that belongs to Crackshot and had a ton of fun, so let's dive into it here. Alright, so pack one, pick one. One of the interesting things about a lot of Peasant Cubes is there aren't necessarily power level outliers to the extent that you see in other cubes, which makes them a little bit more like retail limited. And so ultimately I find that first picks are more subjective than they usually are in cube formats, because let's say you're drafting Vintage Cube, well, a lot of people are going to yell at you if you don't take a Mox or something, whereas here you can kind of do whatever you want. So the thing that I'm most interested in doing is pretty much taking cheap spells that only commit me to one color, and that only have like one colored pip in them at the start here. Taking mana fixing I think has some merit, but ultimately I think that the strong spells are going to be important to pick up, and the fixing is more important once you already know the direction you're going. And so I like the idea of starting here with Bastion of Remembrance. So this is a pretty decent effect, and it gets even more powerful when you're able to combine it with other Blood Artist effects. And it's also an enchantment. That's a pretty uninteractive card type, which means, if we're able to resolve this, then a lot of colors are going to have issues dealing with it. So I wanted to see if I could go into some kind of Bastion deck here from the start. Maybe if we're lucky, we could wheel a Beetleback Chief or end up in some kind of Orzhov token strategy as well. All right, pack one, pick two. Well, at this point, we're not committed to anything, still trying to take the most powerful card out of the packs. And there is another relatively cheap card with only one colored pip that I like here, and that's Compulsive Research. This card, I'm not sure whether I like it as much as the instant speed version of this that only allows you to discard a basic land if you're going to discard one card. But Compulsive is still pretty good. Not too much else in this pack that I think is really that exciting for me. So yeah, just trying to keep myself open to whatever I might be doing by drawing and discarding some cards. In pack one, pick three here. Once again, this pack is looking a little bit lackluster. Note that we started with that Bastion and suddenly we have no black cards in the pack. So still trying to find the open colors, see what the best thing is to do. We do have two non-creature spells already, which means a good start if we want to go into something with prowess. And I think Seeker of the Way is a pretty powerful effect. This thing can be pretty tough for opponents to block because of prowess. Really deserves a lot of respect as an ability, and the lifelink is nice too, whereas Swift Spear is a little more narrow in its applications. You really have to put it into an aggressive deck, and so far I don't think that's what we're shaping up to be. We can also potentially have some kind of life gain synergy with the Bastion and the Seeker. Maybe if we wheel the Ajani's Pridemate or something like that, we can put that kind of deck together. Alright, pack one, pick four. So this is an interesting one for sure. I would say probably the most powerful effect in the pack is Savage Twister, but I've also started with one card in each Esper color, and this is a Gruul gold card. So otherwise I'm kind of interested in Jaya. Emergent Sequence, I think these are both pretty solid effects, though note that both of them are still in Gruul, the two colors that I haven't ventured into so far. And so here I ended up taking First Sphere Gargantua. I'm not sure this was the best pick, but I do think this is a pretty solid card, good 6-drop, and even after it eats a removal spell or trades in combat, you still get an attack for 5 and a card out of it, We also have that compulsive research, which we can use to discard the Gargantua and get some unearthed value, potentially. Alright, pack 1, pick 5. Earlier I was talking about how I don't think fixing is necessarily the most exciting thing in the format. And the reason for that is because you just don't really know whether you're going to end up wanting or needing it, especially based on which colors the land taps for. But bounce lands are pretty different, because bounce lands for me are less about fixing your mana and they're more about card advantage. There are also going to be some synergies with bounce lands and some formats, potentially even some ways to assemble infinite combos with them. But really the more relevant kind of interaction with bounce lands that I'm concerned about is whether there's disruption for them. And I don't think this is going to be one of those environments where playing a bounce land is actually a liability a lot of the time. And that means that I think they're going to be pretty excellent. So yeah, take the Chancery here and we'll see where we continue. Alright, pack 1, pick 6. Earlier I was pretty resistant to indulging the Gruul cards going around in the pack, but at this point there's a Timeless Witness, and this is a very powerful grindy card. It not only adds to the board while providing card advantage, but it does so in a way that provides a lot of inevitability. And unlike the other green cards that I've seen up through this point, there have been some good ones. This one really feels like a pull into green rather than a reward for already being in green. So that was my reason for kind of going off course here, trying to see whether green could be open. In pack 1, pick 7 here, well, we do still have a few green cards, or at least a card that produces green mana. But here I'm deciding that I just want to go with Night's Whisper. I already have multiple black cards. This is cheap, efficient card advantage. A lot of the card advantage that I really like in these lower rarity cubes is tempo positive. So again, things like Timeless Witness, where you're adding to the board while getting your card advantage. Night's Whisper, though, I'm fine to have as an exception because it is just 2 mana to do this. So not falling terribly far behind. Alright, pack 1, pick 8. Speaking of falling far behind, I would love to take something like a Phyrexian Gargantua, potentially, if we're able to make that work, but I already have, I think, another Gargantua that's 6 mana and draws a card, so not really any need for this one. And I'm really lacking some cheap spells, not to mention interaction, so I'm happy here to pick up an Essence Extraction. Even if I don't end up with any life gain synergies, the gain 3 life is going to be pretty nice for a deck like this. Alright, pack 1, pick 9. We get a Tri-land that comes around, but it's not really doing anything super interesting for us. Mesmerizing Dose is a new addition from the latest retail set, but I decided here I just wanted to go with Into the Royal. Very flexible card, just a 2 mana disperse some of the time. You know, you're going to want to hit your opponent's things, slow them down. Sometimes you're going to want to reset your ETBs, maybe trigger an LTB. Being able to kick it in cantrip is great, and yeah, it's just a really nice instant speed effect. Alright, pack 1, pick 10. Well, you might notice here that Into the Royal plus Scholar of the Ages is a sick amount of value. You might also notice that it's a ridiculous amount of mana, so that's not going to be something we're trying to assemble. Vampire Nighthawk, on the other hand, very reasonable amount of mana, and also a very powerful threat, especially to show up here so late. We're not so much interested in doing the Sanguine Bond kind of stuff with our life gain, but we are interested in just trying to stay alive versus some aggressive decks or other decks that could pressure our life total. So pretty happy to pick up a Nighthawk on the wheel. In pack 1, pick 11. These were the blue cards in the pack the first time around. I wasn't too excited by them. I think Trawler Drake could be pretty nice, but you do, I think, need it in a more aggressive spell-centered deck. Whereas at this point, I'm trying to play more of a reactive or maybe controlling game plan, so I think Daze is a card that could be reasonable in my deck. Even though Daze does really fall off in the late game, my thinking is if I make it to the late game, I hopefully will be kind of locked up. So trying to fill holes in the deck here by taking Daze. In pack 1, pick 12. Savage Twister going around very, very late. I do think this is a very strong effect. But we're lucky here to pick up a Dismal Backwater. So once again, if I'm taking Fixing the first time around, maybe I'm taking this Blossoming Sands or something. So it's just so much easier to try to pick up the Fixing after you already know which colors you're going to be playing, especially when, it's not like these are fetch lands and they can just enable colors of mana pretty much no matter what. Alright, pack 1, pick 13. We'll pick up a Spectral Sailor here. This card is interesting because it does represent some inevitability, but 4 mana is a lot to sink into this thing. This card plays well with counterspells. We do have the Daze, but not really anything else like that just yet. Alright, pack 1, pick 14, we get Oneirophage. This is a pickup I'm pretty excited about. A lot of my cards draw cards. I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily going in on any kind of synergy involving Oneirophage and other cards like this at this point, but it just seems like it works really well with a lot of what's in my deck. In pack 1, pick 15, we get a Wildwood Scourge here. Alright. Pack 2, pick 1, pretty painful one here. So at this point I've pretty much committed myself to some kind of Dimir deck, and we have Flametongue Yearling going around. So very powerful card. There's also Inspiring Overseer, another excellent form of tempo positive card advantage I'd love to pick up here. And yeah, I mean, we're definitely not splashing red. We also don't have any fixing for this yet. So at this point, it's just going to be trying to fill holes in my deck once again. If the draft went the way I might have wanted it to from pack 1, pick 1, I might be taking Blood Artist here, try to go for some redundancy of that effect because it can be very powerful to do so. But instead, at this point, I just decided to go with Aven Eternal, just looking for more board presence early, trying to make sure I don't fall too far behind. And it's always going to be a pretty nice body and rate. Alright, pack 2, pick 2. So this was an interesting one. Really powerful pack here. I'm not really interested in Consider, but Drown in Ichor or Icor and Phyrexian Rager are pretty nice. There's also Dinrova Horror. This card is pretty infamous for its impact on one of the Modern Masters limited formats. Though I think that the main reason this card was so obnoxious is because of blink effects and other things like that. It's also a 6 mana gold card, so it's just not a super high priority for me. I don't really anticipate that I'll be proliferating very often, but I do think Drown is going to be a nice interactive spell for me. 2 mana for -4/-4, and unlike Grasp of Darkness, there's only 1 black pip. Alright. Pack 2, pick 3. This is a weird one. Cloud Goat Ranger is a super powerful card, and I can't take it, unfortunately. I'm not going to be hate drafting it or anything like that at this point either. Again, Falconwrath Noble, probably pretty good in the Bastion deck that's usually ending up either Orzhov or Rakdos, if I had to guess. But for us here, there's a Riftwing Cloudskate. And this is pretty nice. It's just a card you can suspend on turn 2, cast it turn 5. You can do, whatever combination of modes on other turns, and yeah, it's just a pretty nice way to affect the board, maybe set the opponent back, spend some mana to make an impact on turn 2, which this deck is not very good at. Alright, pack 2, pick 4. This was an interesting one. I believe here I ended up taking Murderous Cut, But yeah, really not too much going on that's exciting for me. Murderous Cut is pretty interesting, but in order to make this card exciting, feels like you're going to need a lot of self-mill, and well, we're not exactly going to be playing Gnawing Vermin to make that happen. Maybe after sideboard or something like that. So Murderous Cut is just kind of a fine removal spell for us. Alright, pack 2, pick 5. So one thing that I really like, probably more than mana fixing, is the ability to give my draws consistency in terms of Flood and Screw. And so something like Twisted Abomination is going to be very good for that. In the early game, if you need a land, it is one for you. Can also enable extra black mana. It swamp cycles without a black pip in it, which is great. And it's also a 6 mana 5/3 regenerator in a pinch. So pretty happy to pick up an A-bomb and just try to get my deck to work a little bit more often. Alright, pack 2, pick 6. There's Heirloom Blade in this pack, and this is a very powerful card, especially to be here so late. But I'm not really a creature deck, and I don't think I'm going to be able to leverage this card particularly well. There is a Golgari Rot Farm in the pack though, and I was already pretty excited about one semi-on-color bounce land before, so why not pick up a second one? I don't think that 2 bounce lands is going to be too many for us, so yeah, pretty happy to take it here, not really passing too much. Alright, pack 2, pick 7. I believe at this point I decided to take Sanctum of Stonefangs. Another option was Necromancy. We have seen some stuff for the reanimation archetype going around, but I really like the Sanctum here. It's just, while it's another enchantment, which means it's going to be tough for opponents to interact with, it's going to sit and play, it's going to buffer our life total and slowly drain the opponent out of the game. And yeah, it's just very mana efficient for that effect. Alright, pack 2, pick 8 here. So more good green stuff going around that we just kind of have to ignore. Sunset Pyramid is funny because this card's pretty good in the right context. So especially decks that have a hard time getting card advantage or manipulating their draws, I think Sunset Pyramid is great, but we are blue-black, so we don't have that problem. And the Pyramid actually looks, I think, pretty bad for a blue-black deck just because we do have so many better ways to get card advantage and spend our mana. So here I decided to go with Elspeth's Nightmare. It's not an amazing effect because a lot of the time that first mode won't necessarily be able to hit, but it is a pretty nice form of card advantage, definitely going to be good in the right matchup, or maybe against some kind of graveyard strategy, something like that. Alright, pack 2, pick 9. I think at this point I ended up picking up the Inspiring Overseer. Somehow it and the Flametongue Yearling wheeled, and I thought those were the most powerful cards in the pack originally, so maybe everybody else is also playing colors where they can't afford to pick up these cards, which is going to be, I think, somewhat close to how things shook out, but yeah, very surprised to see them both here. Don't mind just hate drafting one. Alright, in pack 2, pick 10. Seasoned Hallowblade going around. This is a very scary card, not something that I think I'm set up very well against, but for us there's just a Dinrova Horror. This card is fine. I think another option that could have been maybe a better pick for me would be just Thriving Isle as blue-black tap land. Dinrova Horror is good, and it's known for being very powerful, but again, once you hit 6 mana for a 4/4, I find that it's really difficult for the card to compensate for its mana cost. Alright, pack 2, pick 11 here. There's only one on-color card for us, and it is the Falconwrath Noble. Very, very sad to see all these chonky white creatures going around, especially Cloud Goat, which I just think is excellent. But we're just going to take the Falconwrath Noble. There's no sense in hate drafting a white card because white drafter is going to get their white flyer no matter what. And we're not really interested in hate drafting the Elvish Mystic either. Okay, pack 2, pick 12. I think at this point I did take the Alseid of Life's Bounty, just as the only mono white card in the pack. Pack 2, pick 13. We have multiple shrines in the pack, multiple white shrines too. I took the one here that's a creature and that makes tokens. And pack 2, pick 14, I believe I took Feud Killer's Verdict. And we get a last pick here, War and Pilferers, which is something that we could consider putting in our deck. Alright, pack 3, pick 1. So this is an interesting one for us. We kind of have two blue cards that can draw and that cost 1 mana competing with each other. I decided to go with the Cryptologist just because I do think the ceiling is higher than Hard Evidence, though the floor I think is significantly higher for Hard Evidence. I'm not sure whether I would make the pick the same way in hindsight. I do think it's pretty close. Alright, pack 3, pick 2. So at first here I was looking at Basilica, Dowser, Sprite, and then I was thinking, you know, maybe I'll just take this Archfiend because I do remember this card somewhat from Modern Horizons 2, and man, this thing was just an absolute beating every time. 4/5 flyer stapled to an infest effect that only affects your opponents, and it comes back when you kill it. Which means you can also try to enable it by discarding it or reanimating it, things like that. So I think this card is really powerful and really scary, and we're going to see what kind of decks we end up playing against. Hopefully decks where -2/-2 is going to be pretty strong. Alright, next up here, we see a gold card, which is pretty interesting. Could be nice for us in Vohar. Though right next to it we do have Whirler Rogue, and this is just a lot of power and toughness for blue, a lot of bodies as well. So I really like the way that this adds to the board. I think we're going to be able to use it to trade favorably a lot of the time, and probably even wheel this Vohar. A little bit sad to pass the Animate Dead after just picking up that Archfiend, but I just think that that's not really the route that we decided to go here. Alright, in pack 3, pick 4, there are a couple options for us. A couple more bounce lands, these are in blue. Repossession, not really something we want, as, you know, it is a gold card if you're trying to get all the value you can out of it. And Obsession doesn't really fit our deck, so I'm pretty happy to pick up a Baleful Strix. This is a really annoying card. Not so great as an aggressive card, but fortunately we are a pretty controlling deck. We're happy to play this cantripping Death Toucher and just make our opponent's attacks seem pretty awkward. Alright, pack 3, pick 5 here. So we have some interesting effects. Gruesome Realization, which to me is kind of like a sideboard card. I think I want to know that the second mode is going to be useful before I'm necessarily putting this thing in a deck, because 2 cards and 2 life for 1 black is really just not where I want to be. Lay Claim, I think this is a pretty strong effect, and yeah, definitely could be the pick here for me. But I believe I picked up this Fairy Vandal. It's just a 2-mana 1/2 flash flyer to start with, but just like with the Oneirophage, I am going to be pretty good at drawing cards with this deck, and that means that this thing could be really nice for us. Alright, pack 3, pick 6. At this point I just decided to go with Gifted Aetherborn. I'm just looking for cheap spells. I don't love the way this thing affects my mana, having a double black 2-drop, but it is very, very powerful, so I think it's worth the cost to my mana to put something like this into the deck. It's not competing with much. Alright, at this point, pack 3, pick 7. Get to pick up Vampire Sovereign. I love this card. It's very, very good. Really annoying to play against, and a little like it has haste some of the time. So yeah, we're quickly going from a deck that seems like it's playing mostly a reactive game plan to something that can drain the opponent pretty quickly. All right, pack 3, pick 8 here. There is a Cr4ckSh07 in the pack. And although Walk the Plank and Rise from the Tides are both somewhat interesting, Cr4ckSh07 is really, really good. It's just so flexible, makes the opponent play awkwardly. Sometimes you're just going to be able to kill the opponent or maybe even draw the game. And yeah. Okay, pack 3, pick 9. There's really nothing going on for us at this point, so I decided I would just take the only monocolored green card out of the pack. And I do think this card is pretty powerful. Okay, pack 3, pick 10, we get our Shipwreck Dowser back. I was hoping that this might happen originally, though at this point I'm not actually sure whether I have enough spells to justify the Dowser, so we'll see where we end up on that later. In pack 3, pick 11 here, pretty late Pelakka Worm. We're able to get a Vohar though on the wheel, which is something that we had hoped for, and yeah, happy to try this card out. Haven't played with it before. Okay, pack 3, pick 12. I think here I decided to take Triplicate Spirits. This kind of thing can be really annoying, and even though we do have a couple answers to it, just an aggressive start with these could get out of hand for us pretty easily. Okay, pack 3, pick 13. We get a Honden of Seeing Winds, so we actually ended up with a few shrines. We're planning on main decking the black one, and well, now that we have this blue one, it's something we could play. A little bit awkward thing though with the blue Honden here is it's not a May, so you can just deck yourself with this thing. And pack 3, pick 14. I think here I decided to go with the Attended Healer. This thing just being, you know, multiple white pips, I think it's a lot less likely to be desirable for whoever ends up drafting it. And last but not least, we get a Sanctum of Tranquil Light. So this is how I ended up building the deck here. You can see we still have a bunch of good cards in the sideboard. And yeah, I'm trying out this Vohar. We have another looter in the Cryptologist as well, lots of card draw, and you know, therefore Fairy Vandal and Oneirophage are in the main deck. We have some Death Touch Lifelinkers in the Nighthawk and the Aetherborn. We're only playing the one shrine here, and we have a couple sweeper effects, Crypt Rats and Archfiend in the deck as well. All right, here we are for game number 1 of round 1. And we keep this beautiful hand with Gifted Aetherborn, Crypt Rats, and 2 islands. Thank you very much, Daze and Fairy Vandal. And we also find a Spectral Sailor here. Go ahead and flash in the Sailor. And I think at this point I choose to develop an island here rather than playing the... oh no, I guess, never mind. I decided to play the Chancery. I'm guessing that I did that because I was thinking it's pretty unlikely I would want to use Daze this early in the game anyway. And I am going to need to play my bounce land at some point. Don't want to trade my Sailor for the Healer's Hawk. Opponent goes for a Battle Screech here. And this is a pretty juicy Daze target because you sort of negate the flashback too by preventing the creatures from entering that would be necessary to flash it back. But I looked at my hand and I just decided, you know what? I have Crypt Rats in hand. I can let this resolve. I can kind of do anything here. So opponent gets to go ahead and flash it back. I do need to find a swamp, but you know, once I find a swamp, I have Night's Whisper, my Vandal's growing, and I really like my position. And we do go ahead and find the A-Bomb here, which is a swamp. Swamp cycling, unlike regular cycling, does not count as drawing a card, but the Whisper does. Now we have this big, or at least growing Fairy Vandal here. Opponent chooses not to attack, and we just get to pass our turn back here after hitting our land drop. We've gotten double black now, which means we can play and activate Crypt Rats in the same turn. Opponent attacks with a bird token. This Grafted War Gear is pretty annoying for us. At this point, I'm not really sure like how much counter magic they have or whatever, but we did kind of pass the turn here to hold up Daze and just see what they would do. Now we're going to draw our Spectral Sailor card. A little bit awkward because we don't trigger our Fairy Vandal, but still think it's worth it, just being able to hold up the mana on the opponent's turn. And so, yeah, at this point we just get to Vampire Sovereign. And then next turn we have that Archfiend coming down. I chose to chump with the Spectral here, which I think is somewhat reasonable because I don't think I'm drawing anything more from it. And the opponent plays another X2, so the position that we're in right now is obviously very good, but the funny thing about it too is unless the opponent has some very specific answer that, like, let's say, you know, some kind of counter spell that doesn't let Archfiend go to the graveyard, like Dissipate, something like that, it doesn't even matter that we're casting this into a ton of open mana. Our life total's high enough that you know, we could just do this next turn. They're going to spend a card just saving their tapper, and we get to crash in here for 5 damage. We're at 17 still, and yeah, we have an Archfiend in play. All right. Okay, now we are back for game number 2 of round 1, and this time another beautiful mana base moment here where we have no blue mana, but we do have pretty strong start here regardless. Okay, we do go ahead and find that island though, which means not only can we daze at some point, but we also get to cast Vampire Nighthawk, which is nice. Opponent is going wide with some Lingering Souls tokens. Very awkward versus Gifted Aetherborn. Like, doesn't really race us. They can't really block. And now, yeah, we just get to go for this Nighthawk, and we're holding up Daze. And opponent has Mistraven, and I think I just decided to daze this thing, just saying, like, I don't want to fall behind on board by that much. I'm not sure I'll get a better target for daze. I'm also not really in a hurry to do anything next turn. And I think I decided to play Drown in Ichor here. This was a super aggressive line. I'm not sure that this was particularly good or bad, but by doing this, I'm pretty much saying you can't double block either of my creatures profitably, so I'm going to be crunching in for a bunch of damage. I'm also saying that you can't draw a card with your Drake later. So I don't think this is like straight up bad or anything, but it is awfully aggressive. Then Mesmerizing Dose comes down on the Nighthawk, a little bit annoying. Opponent here decides to attack with a couple spirits. It's really not a good spot to be attacking though. I'm not sure that you want to be leaving back at least, you know, the 3 spirits necessary to get the Aetherborn off the battlefield, but it's just very difficult to erase all the drain that I've put together. Opponent now has Migratory Root, and we're sitting here with this Archfiend in hand. And we just draw Cryptrats, and yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. So 8/1/1 flyers, goodbye, and our Aetherborn survives, and yeah, that's it. All right, here we are for game 1 of round number 2. And we get this hand, which is pretty nice. Somehow I'm missing the hands where I had like 2 swamps or 2 islands though. But we do rip a swamp off the top, so can't really complain about that. And it is just in time for a Gifted Aetherborn here. This thing is just so good on turn 2. We have the Essence Extraction to follow it up if we want. Opponent has a Gorging Vulture, which is pretty good and pretty scary. There's some kind of Sultai graveyard deck, but it just does not block the Aetherborn here. And I think this turn I'm going to spend by playing Sanctum and Bounce Land. Yeah, and then this allows me to play Whirler Rogue next turn. Alright, so just continuing to drain the opponent here. They're putting some kind of ramp thing together. I want to kill the, whatever this is, Scrap Gorger at some point, but I don't think they're doing anything too scary necessarily next turn. It's just too mana efficient and important, I think, to get the Rogue into play. Alright, opponent casts Fact or Fiction. I don't remember how I did these piles. Looks like... Is this how I did the piles? Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, so kind of the powerful spells that affect the board in the top pile, and the mana and card advantage in the bottom. The opponent takes the mana and card advantage. I'm pretty happy about that if they're not affecting the board, because I feel like I can just kind of try to pounce here in terms of attacking them. Like, they're already at 16, they're taking another 4 this turn. I get to make my Whirler Rogue unblockable with the Thopter tokens, attack for 4. And then now I can just play 2 creatures, which is pretty nice. I can play my Swamp and go for the Nighthawk now, and then I can just flash in the Fairy Vandal at some point. I have Compulsive in hand as well, so things going to be growing bigger than the Vulture if nothing else. And the opponent plays their Visionary, so again, kind of doing what we expected here, given the pile we gave them. And they have a Canker Bloom, so that can blow up the Sanctum. It can kill a Thopter and turn off the Whirler Rogue ability, but still feeling like I'm in great shape here with the opponent at 12, and they're not really demonstrating a way to interact with the threats I've presented. So I think at this point it's time for pre-combat Compulsive here, trigger that Fairy Vandal. Just decide to get rid of a land, and I think at some point I'm going to use the Essence Extraction here. Get to give that Whirler Rogue unblockable one more time. Go for a big attack for 8. Again, this is just really bad news for the opponent. They decide to trade here, so the Sanctum sticks around, which is great for me. And then I'm not sure if this is spewy. I guess I'm already over 30 life. But at this point I decide I'm just going to take away this Scrap Gorger, try to limit the opponent's mana a little bit. I don't know if it was really important or necessary to do this, because they do still have plenty of mana, but I don't think it's terrible. And the opponent's now in this spot, pretty awkward for them. They're at 2 life, facing down lethal flyers from me, so in order to survive I either have to not make an all-out attack or they have to have some kind of interaction. But I have some kind of interaction, so here we just get to kill that Vulture, and we're on to game number 2. Alright, here we are for game 2 of round 2. And the opponent, interestingly, puts me on the play. And so I do think that putting people on the play can make sense, especially maybe like a controlling deck or, other grindy late game deck like this. But the last game didn't show anything about the late game. The last game was very much about me applying pressure, draining the opponent's life. So I'm quite happy to be put on the play here. And I think here I went ahead and just played the Vohar. Next turn I can go like Sanctum plus Bounce Land and then start looting away excess lands. I think I might have played Baleful Strix here now after drawing that. Yeah, looks like I did. And now we get to play the Bounce Land. I don't remember what I picked up. Maybe Island? I picked up Swamp. Okay, sure. Opponent has their Mana Dork and their tap lands. They're going to get Gorging Vulture into play, sure. And I get to loot away excess land with Vohar. And I think at this point I just play my Falconwrath Noble. And I get to attack with the Strix because I don't really think the opponent's that likely to block, and I get to drain them twice with the Falconwrath Noble because that card's nuts. And the opponent just takes it. Guiltleaf Winnower comes down. This is pretty bad for me. So they get to blow up the Vohar at this point. But the good news is we do have Vampire Sovereign in hand, and I'm very glad they're not able to kill that. So goodbye Vohar. They get drained for 1. And looks like I just went for the attack here. If I wanted, I could have tried to preserve the Falconwrath Noble. But again, the reason I'm doing this is just I feel like any trades are good for me. The opponent's at 18. Even if they block and trade, they're taking a damage from the Strix and getting drained twice by the Noble. And I'm playing a Vampire Sovereign as a follow-up, so once again, just really taxing their life total here. And mine is really buffered as well. Wasn't super relevant last game, but anyway, opponent goes for the immediate kill on the Strix. and then they reanimate Vohar, which is pretty scary. They have some powerful spells in their deck, so it's not really something I want to let them untap with. And of course, they have to attack here, but their 4/3 menace is not really getting them super far, probably. I think here I started with compulsive research. Yeah, and I think I discarded 2 cards here, though I don't remember what they were. Because I think after finding Archfiend, I just wanted to try to hit land drops for that. Cryptologist, and what was the other one? Sanctum, interesting. So yeah, I guess my thought process is I'm not going to be playing the Sanctum this turn. I want to drown that Vohar so that thing doesn't mess me up. The opponent seems to have a hard time against flyers, and yeah, that makes Archfiend just more tempting as a prospect. And they just mill Spider spawning here too, so now suddenly I'm very happy to have Archfiend in hand. And the opponent is not casting too many spells here. We get to attack, put them down to 6. And at this point, I could play the Archfiend, but I just have no reason to. I think I can just play my Nighthawk and hold up into the Royal with Kicker, which is quite nice. Oh yeah, opponent goes for this Meteor Golem, which is pretty rough for them, so they tried to target the Vampire Sovereign, but now we get to use that into the Royal. The opponent is almost just dead. They attack me for 7. We're still a pretty high life total. Now I get to, yeah, just Vampire Sovereign them, go back up to 14, attack them down to 1. So really forcing that spider spawning to come out from them. And then, of course, I do have the Archfiend at the ready when that comes. So the opponent goes for the spawning. They can attack. Looks like they only, well, yeah, they don't want to represent any kind of combat trick or anything by attacking with anything else first. Though, frankly, I think it might just be good to attack with like Meteor Golem first, and then you get like an extra spider or whatever. I don't know. Seems fine. But not super relevant here because we do have the Archfiend, and that's going to finish things up. All right, here we are for round 3, game 1. And we have this hand, which is a little bit clunky because we could lead on Swamp, and that means if we top deck a Swamp, then I give myself outs to play Aetherborn on 2, but I think it's more important to just Cryptologist on turn 1 instead, and then start looting on turn 2. So this turn, yeah, we get to play Swamp and just pass. There's no punish to trying to loot at the end of the opponent's turn here, so that's what we're going to do. And we do find the Swamp necessary for the Aetherborn, so at this point we just get to pitch an island. And we find Vohar as well, so we get to set up some nice mana efficient turns here. And the dream is to go, after leveling Cryptologist and putting Vohar into play, then put an Oneirophage into play and just have that thing be huge. So that's what my plan is here. We're going to play Vohar and then play the bounce land, pick up the island, pass the turn. And then opponent just plays a land. We're going to loot end of their turn. We find a Fairy Vandal, which is also looking quite good. I imagine I ditch the island here. I do. And the opponent has a nasty surprise for me in Flame Sweep to kill both of my looters. No more value with the Oneirophage. And here, we're now in this spot, which is not ideal. We get to play Gifted, or whoops. Oh, yeah, I don't know. At this point, I guess I decided to just play Oneirophage, see if it's going to survive, and then if it does, it's just going to be an increasing problem and threat for the opponent as the game progresses. So pretty happy that it has at least lived to be a 2/3 here. Now we get to, yeah, play our Aetherborn. The opponent has Mana Leak. They might have wondered if I had the land drop and I could have played around it, but my land enters tapped. And now we have Fairy Vandal up. the opponent kills our Oneirophage, we get to flash into Fairy Vandal, eat an Elemental here, just kind of gaining a life. I have no interest in trying to trade for the young Pyromancer because I do have Archfiend in hand. I'm also just not that scared of the thing in general. And here we find a land drop, which is pretty nice. We get to develop our Vampire Sovereign. They are going to need some kind of answer for that. And they have a G2 Chronicler to get back Urza's Rage, which is interesting. Not sure what they're going to be playing it on. Vampire Sovereign conveniently having 4 toughness. And here I'm considering Into the Royal main phase on their elemental token, and then I realize I just don't care about that. I also know that they just got back Urza's Rage, and well, the Fairy Vandal's the one thing they can really kill with that. So I decide that if I leave the Fairy Vandal back, they don't really have any attacks, and that means they're really incentivized to go for the Urza's Rage pre-combat here, which means leaving my mana up isn't in vain, and frankly just gives me a really mana efficient turn if it happens. So get to attack for 3. Would also be happy if they tried to kill the Sovereign, you know, never upset to reuse that thing's ETB. Opponent goes for Experimental Augury and Swift Spear, and sure enough, there's that Urza's Rage on the Fairy Vandal. So yeah, at this point we're just going to save the Fairy Vandal. We draw Swamp, which is very nice. This means that we are going to have Archfiend coming down now, so the opponent goes for a big attack. We just, again, gain a life here. And now we get to play Archfiend, and it just feels so game-breaking every time this thing comes down. And the opponent takes some damage, and I thought that the game would just be over after we played Archfiend like it had been previously, but the opponent does have Lay Claim here. Another powerful 7-mana card. So now we're just kind of staring at this Archfiend, though the thing here is the opponent's at 7 life. If I can just kill the Archfiend at some point, then I can unearth it, and then get it back for one hasty turn and try to kill them. Opponent has Thieving Magpie. Of course, Drown in Ichor does not kill the 4/5 just yet, and it's not worth attacking. I mean, I guess I could have sent the... it would actually be pretty interesting. Maybe I could have sent the Fairy Vandal. And if the opponent blocks with the Archfiend, then I can go -4/-4, and then try to kill them on the next turn. But that plan does lose pretty hard to, well, most interaction, and in this case, even just Thieving Magpie would have thwarted that plan. We do draw Vampire Nighthawk here, though, which is excellent for us. It means the opponent's going to need some kind of removal, or they're going to have to take some damage, or maybe trade. We draw Daze here, which is not exactly an exciting pickup. So we do go for the attack. Opponent decides to trade. I'm very happy about this because we're getting close to a point where we would be able to kill them. You know, next turn, where we have lethal set up here, Drown plus Unearth should get rid of the opponent's flyers and give us lethal. Though the opponent does have Kicked Burst Lightning on our Vampire, and that is going to mess up our plans here for sure. Opponent goes for this attack. They're definitely pulling ahead here, and they go for Think Twice. Now we're going to Daze the Think Twice just because, well, Daze isn't doing anything else here. And we find Island, so it just kind of seems like the game is running away. Decide to go ahead and give -4/-4 to the opponent's Drake. And then they find a Curious Obsession, which is pretty annoying for us. We block one, they draw a card with the other. So they're drawing a lot of cards, and, well, we're just drawing some lands. Definitely feels like we're dead. They continue to make this attack, which is pretty annoying for us. They have Electrostatic Infantry, pretty powerful card, and they have Quandrix Pledge Mage. So at this point, I'm thinking, like, I don't even think I'm going to get or have lethal anytime soon, but they just developed 2 X2s, so I just have to kind of fire off the Unearth. But I do draw Night's Whisper. So we're going to start with Night's Whisper here. Hope I don't end up dying from it. Draw 2 cards, lose 2 life. We find Essence Extraction and Sanctum. And so this is going to allow us to Unearth after putting a counter on the Fairy Vandal. And we now have 6 power of flying. We don't even have the double black to cast the Essence Extraction if I wanted to, and that means that we are forced here to go for the Sanctum and just hope that the opponent dies to the Sanctum Drain on my next main phase. And the opponent draws a couple cards. Can they Lava Axe me? They cannot. Alright, here's game 2 of the finals. And we get to keep this hand, which is pretty nice. Find an island as well. And a Fairy Vandal, so I believe we're going to be developing that one here, and then next turn we can start drawing cards or whatever. Opponent has a Think Twice, and Stormfleet Aerialist without Raid, which is a very sad card, and a Mountain. So now we get to play our Fairy Vandal. They just kill it right away, which I think is totally fine. I think at this point I suspended Cloudskate and played Bounce Land. Yeah. And then my plan here is to just try to spend all of my mana next turn. But the opponent goes for this Curious Obsession line, which seems to be why they played their 1-2 Aerialist out in the previous turn. And fortunately for us, we find Vampire Nighthawk, which is just a huge problem for the opponent. So now they need a removal spell, like they need their Urza's Rage or whatever for the Nighthawk, or their Aerialist is just going to lose its Curious Obsession. So they go for Deep Analysis, so I know that I'm safe. And yeah, luckily for me, they don't have the Urza's Rage. So now we have Nighthawk. They have lost their Curious Obsession. I think I just played Falconwrath Noble here. Yeah. Just playing Falconwrath Noble, and I have Crypt Rats, so we can kind of do a lot of damage out of nowhere, maybe, on a future turn. Opponent Chronicler's back Burst Lightning. Chronicler is good, but it is just pretty slow. And here we get to have Cloudscape come down. Now we have a bunch of evasive threats. We get rid of the opponent's, I believe, Fairy Conclave. Yeah, one of their only blue sources, and it can also turn into a blocker for some of our threats. We go for Night's Whisper. And I think, did I play Aetherborn Sanctum here? I don't remember if I did that. I think I probably did. Yeah, and then just an attack for 6. Shouldn't have done it pre-combat, but that's fine. And then the opponent here goes for, let's see, Beetleback Chief. So that's going to be pretty good with the Falconwrath Noble in play. Granted, we do know that they have the Burst Lightning, but I figure if I play Crypt Rats here, it forces them to Burst Lightning the Falconwrath Noble, which is something they might have to do anyway. And, you know, their life total is still really getting drained. And I might just randomly have lethal here. So sure enough, I get to resolve the Crypt Rats without the Burst Lightning happening, which is excellent for me. Opponent goes for some blocks here. And then they try to Burst Lightning, and now I get to use my Crypt Rats. Just wipe away everything. X is 3. They're going to take 3 damage from the Crypt Rats. They're going to lose all their creatures. And then on top of that, anything dying is going to drain them because of the Falconwrath Noble. And so, sure enough, lots of triggers go onto the stack here, and we got there. So yeah, got a trophy here with our blue-black life drain deck, which is not something you say very often. And really sweet draft of Crackshot's Peasant Cube. Had a lot of fun. And yeah, lots of thought and effort put into this cube. Archfiend was very powerful for me, probably the strongest card in my deck. And yeah, hope you all enjoyed watching. We'll see you next time.